Well, thanks very much for that, Adrian. Very interesting take on metrics and altmetrics, and I look forward to picking this up with you in the discussion later.
Our final speaker is Carlo Lavizzari, a lawyer with a strong involvement and dedicated support for the Publishers Association of South Africa. Carlo is also the lawyer for the International Publishers Association and the STM Association. Thanks very much for joining us today, Carlo.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for adding a legal perspective on making scientific works more available and increase the readership. So I think I've divided the presentation into two parts. One is focusing on the current South African lawmaking process as that process is in full swing. And then I provide a nutshell overview of what sort of mega trends exist internationally, some of which have already been picked up by the other speakers in the panel. So the copyright bill has been a work in progress for some time and concerns not only publishing, but the entire creative sector, so also music, film, software, broadcasting, and remains highly contentious. I will limit my comments here to what's most relevant to the scholarly sector. And I think the one provision that is highly contentious across all sectors, but also difficult for the scholarly sector, is the notion of introducing a hybrid fair use provision. So fair use is an American concept that says under certain circumstances it is fair and legal to use another person's creative work without permission. And the South African version looks at the US wording in the US Copyright Act, broadens that, introduces notions that are not in the US Act, and then in addition grafts on another 8 pages of other exceptions from copyright onto the US notion of fair use, which most people would agree is already a pretty vague and wide concept. So that creates significant uncertainty for publishers locally. How will they recoup their investments when exceptions appear to be the better part of the cheese, if I can put it this way? It's like Swiss cheese without the cheese. So apart from the fair use exception and other wide exceptions, such as the ability also in ordinary teaching environments for people who have to complete master thesis assignments, that they're allowed to incorporate the work of others into their prescribed works, which creates all kinds of additional questions regarding the teaching environment. There are specific issues that should concern scholars. So the notion of state copyright is given a broader application, also involving now works made under the control of local government. That was not previously the case. So there will be a question mark: when is a work made under the control of a local government, and when is it a university, or rather, when is it the state, the central government? These are unresolved questions, and they may interfere with another act called the Intellectual Property from Publicly Financed Research Act, which is a South African act that has existed for some time. There is a concept of green open access introduced with a possible embargo of 12 months in the act for research that is 50% state funded. The bill does not really specify whether that is central government only. Also it doesn't seem to apply to university or funded research, but literally state, which probably would be the central government. And then there is a limitation on assignments. There are various limitations of assignments, but the one that seems to be unclear is when a work is under the custody of the state. That is an entirely new provision that's come in. And so it would appear that a work can also be under the custody of the state. That is not actually a state copyright, a government-held copyright work. So there is substantial possibility of interference of the state, local or national or maybe state-owned institutions, research institutions claiming that they have custody over works even where they are not in fact the copyright owner. So these are some of the problems. There are many other problems with the bill. I go through some more on this page so that you can have a look what is most relevant for scholarly publishing, but it also raises the wider issue. This copyright bill and its approach to intellectual property goes back to something Andrew said. We have a worldview that information essentially is an imported good. It comes from the north and is consumed in the south. That is, of course, not always so, and especially not true for works and content published by South African scholarly publishers. But it seems to underlie the entire drafting of the bill. And also a high degree of paternalism. The Minister of Trade and Industry will get authority to effectively mandate author-publisher agreements. Those would then have to be gazetted to be mandatory, but it's a colossal task, as a Minister of Trade and Industry would not ordinarily know how research publishing works and how these agreements for monographs, etc., and how the economics behind align. So substantial question marks for the publishing industry locally if this bill, which remains highly contested, were to be signed into law. Wisely, the president so far has refrained from signing the bill into law, has referred the bill back for being unconstitutional to Parliament, and that is in fact where the bills now sit and hopefully can be severely panel beaten into shape. I'm very happy to go deeper into any of these issues depending on how they line up with the very interesting presentations of the other speakers on the panel. And I quickly go to the overall research publishing environment, which is kind of a contrast with the micro level on South Africa. So on a global scale, the open science and open access is probably the dominant feature, at least for scientific, technical, and medical publishing, and increasingly for scholarly, also of art, humanities, and social science publishing. There's a UNESCO recommendation in the making. It will be quite influential once it sees the light of day. It has been delayed slightly due to COVID, but I would recommend to you to engage with that proposed recommendation, as open access, for my eyes, seems to be still very much a focus of Europe and the US, less so with the view of developing countries. Perhaps India, China have a great measure of impact on open access policies, although they develop their own views, which do, for the time being, not align with the views of the EU, UK post-Brexit, and the US. For a true open access environment to emerge, however, one would have to start aligning policies, which I guess is what the UNESCO recommendation tries to achieve, but is probably only a piece of the puzzle rather than the whole puzzle. But in addition to going across from the US, China, India, Europe, including the UK, one should also take cognizance of the needs of different disciplines than the hard natural sciences and biology, and also look at the global regions. Otherwise, there is a risk of people being underserved in the subscription model publishing to exchange them for other people being underserved with publishing opportunities in the open access publishing model. Another trend that may in fact become a tsunami and swallow open science and open access is in fact the open data trend. And I'm very glad that the other speakers are also homing in on what is needed for a infrastructure, metadata and other infrastructure for open data. But clearly the amount of data and how it can be used is being revolutionized. And certainly one of the problems the world will not have in future is too little data. The question is, how will we cope with masses and masses of data? Together with that comes, in fact, a partial, perhaps, solution to these tsunamis of data, and that is artificial intelligence and text and data mining. There's great progress that is being made. Many new questions, of course, come with it. I think a year ago, Springer published the first book on alkaline batteries that was completely generated through artificial intelligence. There's no human author involved. Naturally, it is not a work that originates completely new scientific findings, but systematizes, summarizes the state of the art about batteries in a specific subset of batteries. But still, it is a viable publication, and I think that is pretty much a first. So there are exciting new opportunities there for publishers who, as custodians of and organizers of content, preservers of content, have the ability to work with the tool makers, the software houses that produce text and data mining applications, as in the end, the old adagio still applies that garbage in, garbage out. So the limiting factor is, in fact, the quality and accessibility of the inputs to any artificial or text and data mining operation. And publishers are extremely well positioned to play a role in that environment. That would conclude my presentation, but I look so much forward to the discussion. Thank you.